Hey everyone, welcome to the Recruitment Show. We are talking about all of the major topics that people are discussing right now. Everything recruiting, future of work, and everything in between. I've got guests from all over the world to come and share their perspective and their thoughts and feelings and all of that stuff on these key topics. It might not be politically correct. It might not be what you want to hear, but it's people's perspectives, and it's important to hear people's perspectives. I love storytelling, and I think one story can illuminate a million more and really increase our understanding of these topics. So sit back, whether you're watching live or after, grab a drink, take a seat, and enjoy. Awesome, and we're live. Everyone, thank you very much for joining me. Welcome to the Recruitment Show. Today I've got Terry Isner, a CEO of Jaffe PR.
That is correct.
Amazing. Thank you very much for joining me. Do you want to start by introducing yourself? Love to hear a little bit about your story and so forth before we dive in.
Yeah. So again, Terry Isner, Terry M. Isner, which is TMI. So if you want to find me anywhere, it's sharing TMI on all social media, which I think is a pretty funny and great handle to have, because that's exactly what we all do on social media. I'm the CEO and owner of Jaffe. I have two business partners, and Jaffe is a legal marketing, branding, and PR agency. And we have been in the business since the U.S. Supreme Court allowed law firms and lawyers to actually market themselves, which was about 45 plus years ago.
Wow.
So we kind of got the ability to write the book on legal marketing and legal PR. And we've been a virtual based firm for 30 plus years. So we kind of also really dove right into the idea of I think the benefits of, that at home work environment way before, it was okay. And I still question whether people still think it's okay.
Well, we'll go into that. You were way ahead of your time, 30 years ago.
We were.
Wow.
Yeah. And Jaffe was originally, created and owned by a gentleman who passed away about 11 years ago. And my business partners and I kind of stepped up to purchase the business, take it over, and really reinvent what it is, which I think is perfect for some of today's topics, because I can, really talk from experience of what we had to do to kind of right our ship to stay relevant.
Yeah. No, love to hear that. We love to hear that. How did you find it just kind of on the remote work? 30 years ago, I wasn't working 30 years ago. I've got to say, I finished university in 2002, 2003. So 20 years ago, not too far off. But even then, I remember my first jobs, it was like, you've got to be in 8:30, can't leave till 6. I was working then I started in the City of London, where it was just classic. It was got to be in 8:30, can't leave till 6. Then it was drinking. Then it was like, you can get drunk, but as long as you turn up at 8:30 at your desk, you're good to go. There was no one back then. All the people were staying until the boss left. There was no work from home thing then for us.
No, not at all. Because you didn't want to leave. Like, you didn't want to be seen to be the guy who left early at all.
Yeah. It was very much, being seen. It was just a done thing, right? You just, I didn't know anything else.
But you know what's really funny in a virtual world? That still exists. And what I realized in it, because the only way that you can communicate and say, I'm still here, is emails or answering an email or doing something. And I find a lot of new folks that join our organization and don't really know the dynamics of a virtual world. And they still have that sense of, I'm going to stay until the boss leaves, so they see that I'm this hard worker. It still exists in that virtual world. They'll respond to an email that they didn't have to, just to let you know that they're still there and they're checking their emails. It's quite funny.
I love that. I think it was a few months ago, I heard about this thing called a mouse jiggler. Have you heard of a mouse jiggler?
I think you can get it for like, I mean, literally, I think it was around about the time you started to hear the word quiet quitting. And this mouse jiggler, you can get it $12 on Amazon, and it's like a pad like this, and you put your mouse on it, and it jiggles, and it makes whoever's makes you like your screen alive, and if you're on a Teams or whatever, it will say that you're still online, and you actually haven't gone to the gym for like 5 hours and gone for coffee.
That's funny. I love the way that we can beat the system like that from time to time. My husband has to take these courses in real estate, and they have to be on for the whole period of time. And he could definitely use the mouse jiggler because he is constantly running back with a timer and then hitting his mouse.
But I just can't help but feel, if you're quiet quitting, whatever that means, and you've got a mouse jiggler, it's probably time to look for a new job, isn't it?
I would think so. I don't think the culture's right for you.
No, that's funny. How have you found, I'm just be interesting, is obviously you've been working remote for so long, it sounds like, which is wonderful. How have you found it, like in the early days when you were hiring people for yourself and they'd come for interview? I mean, I guess that would be face to face, but when they found out there was no office, how did you find it? Was it people that were like, actually, no, I want to come in? Or how have you how have you found it? And has that changed over time? Interesting to hear.
Yes, it has, because nobody wants to come in anymore at all. Nobody wants to get together personally, which is quite funny. It was interesting. I don't think in the idea of remote, which we know it today, is really what the concept was back then. It was the idea that we don't need a bricks and mortar, a facility. We don't need to pay, for all this empty space. And I thought it was really a very smart, concept. So everybody was local at the time. So what you had was meeting time. So you'd meet at the owner's apartment, condo, home, whatever, was the case at the time, maybe once a month. And you would have, large group meetings at that time and go through things like, let's just say a mini retreat in a way, but it's not just, an office meeting. And that was the face-to-face. And think there's no Teams, there's, the smartphone isn't where the smartphone is at that point at all. So really all you have is the phone and email. And that's how, the communications happen. But because we were all local in the Maryland area, it was a lot easier for us to go to somebody's home and collaborate and work if that was the case. And most of the client work was also local. Now that changed, of course, and then you become the ability for new technologies to come into place. And as those technologies came into place, it made it a lot easier for us to communicate. We didn't have to feel contained or restricted by region and the ability to get together. And so now people are starting to move in different areas, which then allowed us to realize we can fish in different areas. We can find talent. We can find clients. So just being comfortable with the idea that I don't have to measure somebody coming into the office and the time they come to the office. I don't need to have that personal collaboration. And if so, it was organically happening because people kind of felt they wanted to get together, or they invited you over to the house and you had lunch at their house and you had your teammates there. And it was really a great dynamic. But as we continued to grow, it was really how those technology tools fell into place that made things a lot more efficient for us and the ability for us to collaborate more. And so we just kind of kept evolving with that. And then along comes COVID and everybody has to shut down. And being the law firms as our client base, which are, usually slower to adapt to things, always conservative, was in a panic mode. You come to work, we collaborate in war rooms, and I need my receptionists and my teams, and associates must come to work and do the work. And it was pure panic. And so everybody's running around, talking about TikTok and baking bread and doing these things. And we're kind of going, hold on, it's the same day for us. It's exactly the same. So we started writing policies and helping people with their announcements and communications and how to actually operate within that virtual sector. so we were ready, we
Yeah.
were kind of like, wait, this exists, this works. So it's been really kind of wonderful us to watch the rest of the world and our client base and everything kind of come around to what we were doing so naturally, and watch them become so much more comfortable.
Yeah, that's interesting. Really interesting, because also a lot of the big topics right now, or certainly the last few years, people have talked about, obviously, like people's leadership styles have had to change. People are so used to the presenteeism, or you can see your team member there, and of course, if they're sitting in front of you, they must be working.
Right.
And then you've got the burnout, loneliness, separation between work and life, and things like that. Had you kind of, when you started, did you go through some of that stuff as well as you were working
Me
at home? So like,
personally, not at all. Because I love, I'm a Cancer, so I love to be in my shell, and I thrive in the idea of my own music, my own space, my own ability to do
right,
what I need to do. And for a large part of my career, I was the creative director. So, I want to kind of get into my own head. I want to have stimulation around me to help, me think. And I'm not going to have that stimulation in an office environment at all. It's, so much more sterile and just rigid, and it just doesn't allow for the idea of creativity to kind of flow. So for me, I loved every bit of it. Also, as we talked about earlier, at that time I had 3 little kids. So I loved the idea of having the ability to go to school and to be the field trip dad and to do those kind of things. So I started to realize the importance at that point of life itself and being present in that. So all of that really for me came together. Unfortunately, I can't say those that I've hired always fit within that mold. Um, I think it's a really unique person that is conditioned or has the discipline to work in that environment. And some folks are, very socially driven, and they need to feed off of other people.
yeah,
And I have recognized, in the hiring process, of who might not make it, because you thrive better in a work environment where there is accountability. You
yeah,
thrive better in a work environment when there is collaboration or the ability just to socialize. And those that have been here the longest, and for 10 plus years, several folks, that's because they thrive in the idea of that work-life balance. And I don't need to be, tethered to or connected to individuals and or the work dynamic,
yeah, yeah. That's
physically.
true. Yeah, it's interesting because also I think like some younger folks I speak to, they quite want. It's funny. They quite want to go in because, like, so something to be said early on about, you learn so much from sitting next to someone, or you learn a lot. I always say, like, who you're working for or with is often more valuable than the job itself. Certainly early on, like you just, like, how are they
You're a
doing
little
so well? And
sponge.
you just model you kind of take on their things. You almost model yourself, by these folks, and then you just kind of adapt to what works for you and stuff. So certainly for me early on, like I just learned loads from like going in and from the different leaders I had and teammates and stuff, and then like set up on my own. So that's it. I think just some people struggle early on with, you're on your own, great, and actually you don't need to check in, and I trust you, and all those things are amazing things. But sometimes people are like, oh my god, you know I just sometimes need some structure. So obviously
Yes.
there's no one size fits all, and actually it might be that as one develops in their career, the way you like to work also changes, and it might be you find somewhere where you go in, and then a few years later actually you quite enjoy working at home or with more flexibility and things like that.
Yeah. But again, it's that discipline, and that's really, and some folks don't have it. So
Yeah,
the couch looks real great, or there's something happening on the TV, and you're just, or you're called to the garden outside, and there's a level of discipline, and all those things are great because they recharge us, or they kind of bring the idea of more innovation or clear our minds and allow us, to be more productive. But for those that can't find that balance, yeah, you're sitting on the couch too much. And in the end, I'm going to realize that, right? Because
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you have a billable hour and your billable hour isn't matching what I'm expecting. And so, there are ways in which we have to put in um, forms of measurement within it, because you don't have the
yeah,
time clock, you don't have the physical person coming in and out and walking past your office, or easy to go knock on the door and go. But you start to think virtually that I can knock on those doors through Teams. I can monitor. I choose not to, but of course I can see red, green, and yellow. I'm a smart man, I know, but I also created a culture and an environment that allows that and wants that of you. So why would I measure that, right? So
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
there
yeah.
are things we could do if that was something I was concerned about, but I surround myself around people that I want to believe in and trust and help to grow, and that truly value a culture like this. And a lot of folks come from being in house and coming from a different workforce based of the 80s and 90s. And so that mentality is still in there. Our parents telling us you go to work every day and you do this.
Yeah.
And those dynamics have changed, right? So, some of us, it's a little hard to kind of go into that because we were conditioned another way, especially the generations, of Gen X, boomers still. And so it's a different dynamic sometimes. And you have to watch that struggle too. And they want a little structure. So you put a little
Yeah,
bit
yeah.
of structure in place.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I think you also just have to learn how to work, or what works for you.
Yep.
I mean, certainly I think a lot of people struggle with it. It's like time management. I mean, it's just so classic. It's how do you put stuff in your diary? Do you have a to-do list?
Yep.
I mean, as humans can't concentrate for too long. Some of my team that have this. I can't remember. It's the tomato. It's not the tomato method. I can't remember what it's called now. Pomodoro method, where there's a timer you can have on your browser. It's like 20 minutes. You do concentrated work for 20 minutes. You step away for 5, back in for 20.
Yep.
There's quite a lot of things that can help you be productive. I mean, and whether it's the garden or that fridge starts singing to you that you need to look inside. There's a lot of distractions at home, also at work. But I think, for me, like what's really helped me is I have a to-do list and a diary, and I've moved much more to my diary, and I put the things I need to do in time blocks, like whatever it might be. I mean, I can move them, drag them around, but they're there. I know I have a success. I tick it off once I've done it, and things like that. That starts to work really well for me. And then I listened to a guy called David Goggins. I don't know if he's an American guy, ex-Navy SEAL. He's a motivational speaker, ultra marathon runner guy. He does all these great, let's go videos on Instagram. It was a really interesting video for him. And he was talking about having mental aid breaks. Like in a marathon, you might pick up a bit of water or a carb gel on the way. For him, his mental aid stations at home are does some work, and then maybe it's lunch, and he leaves his work, he goes to have lunch, doesn't have his phone or his computer. Could even be just for 20 minutes, and it's just a mental aid station. Or even making a cup of coffee is quite good. You just go downstairs or whatever, make a coffee, 5 minutes, but then you come back and it's actually you're a little bit you recharge mentally, and then you can go back in for for another session or whatever. So I think it's important to implement those kind of things into your work day.
Absolutely. And I agree 100%. And I think those are those disciplines and conditions that that I'm going to go recharge. The virtual dynamic is hard on some folks because maybe you don't have an upstairs, right? So is the office in the bedroom? So how do you go from personal and professional in the same space? And that's dangerous for folks. That's real burnout. So you do want to find ways in which you step outside of that, do some creativity on the back porch, take a call outside, if it's an internal call or something. So there are many ways in which we have to understand that the work at home dynamic can also, become really restrictive, and in a sense, and you're like, I need to get out of my space. And so go on a bike ride, right? Go shift your gears. One of the things that I tell my folks is we are best at certain times in the day. So first off, do not set a meeting up for me before 10:30 in the morning. I'm not going to be good. I'm not going to be happy. And it's not a winning situation for anybody. So that period of time for me from 10 to about 3 o'clock is golden. Now, there are times in there where I'm good for client discussions. I'm time in there. I'm good to help talk you off the ledge, as one of my colleagues or peers or employees. And then there's times where it's my time to work on an ad campaign, to work on a branding exercise, and I have to, go into that. And I now know those times when I'm best. And I try to tell people that too. Know that, right? Know when to come on. And what we've learned also for us is we have a great deal of super highly professional, highly talented, creative, and strategic moms. And so these are, women who are out in the world who are doing amazing things. It's time to start having their families. They don't want to go back. They want to be mom and professional. And we create a dynamic that really supports that. And many of the folks that we have are moms. So I get to watch babies go to high school and graduate, and off they go.
Yeah.
And it's quite amazing because if you think about it, I can manage the dynamic of how mom's available when there's baby brain or whatever else that's, happening to them, and they can fit in to when they are the most productive. And then I can watch a billable hour time go from, I'm going to cut back, I'm having my baby, I'm going to go to part-time, I'm going to bill a certain amount of hours, I'm only available a few days, to now babies grow up and babies need soccer clothes and ballet and trips and all these other things. So now mom is working more hours and more hours and more hours. And next thing you know, this is a superstar, woman who's highly successful professionally and highly successful, personally as a mom.
Love that.
And when I realized how well this culture fits a demographic like this, it also changes the idea because now, I'm a relevant agency who's put DE&I in place. I've got, women partners. I've got very successful women, leading the charge in PR or in marketing strategies. And I feel really great because I'm creating a culture and a dynamic, which is exactly what we're out fighting right now for law firms and other corporations to step up and do.
Love that. There's that part of the workforce is incredibly powerful and untapped, and they struggle to get opportunities. Certainly before COVID, more so now. But and I think what you've been able to do and tap into that's amazing. Like a lot of other firms will miss out on that talent. They want them in 3 days a week. How come? Well, because I don't know, the water cooler moment or whatever, whatever it might be.
And we have our own, we create our own. We're leaving in 2 weeks for a corporate retreat in Savannah, Georgia. And, we all haven't been together since the COVID lockdown. So it's really great. We've grown so much since then that, I'm hiring people I've never physically met, and they're working out great. It'll be so great just to give them a hug and wow, I'm meeting the real person. And I've been working with this person for 2 years now.
Yeah. It's crazy. I want to talk about that, but winding back, it's interesting. You when you're most productive, right? And it's a thing. I'm reading a great book book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. If no one's read it, got to read it. Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. That kind of 3 cornerstones of good health is sleep, nutrition, and exercise.
Right.
And sleep is not often talked about, and it's so important. And to your point, there is such a thing as a night owl. There is such a thing as a morning person. We do have different rhythms and things like that. And I'm kind of like, I get up early. My kids wake me up, but I get up early and I'm on it in the morning. Whereas a friend of mine, similar to you, don't talk to me before 10:30, but they're still hitting it hard at later on. Yep. So again, that's part of just kind of knowing yourself, isn't it? Just understanding when you're most productive, because again, the 9 to 5 factory era vibe is you're just kind of assuming that everyone's productive between those hours. You've got to
Not the
do
case.
whatever 9 to 5, and actually, sorry, you want productive people. You want good outcomes, good outputs, whatever. And actually, one person might be way better. You want them working on your stuff at night, and someone else, you don't want them working at night. They're going to make way too many mistakes. They're almost asleep. You want them when they're most productive, and it might be in the morning.
Yep.
So that comes with knowing yourself, and then also finding the right company for you that it gives you the opportunity to work in the times that you're most productive. I think
It's twofold though. Knowing yourself, right? Having that discipline and being comfortable in saying, this is when I'm most productive. And it's also at certain things. Like talking to people. There's a certain time frame, and then I'm done. I don't want to talk to people anymore. But when you're running a company, you end up talking to people a lot. So when do you get to do your work and do your things? And it's interesting going back to the moms, right? There's time frames that the moms have to be moms, and you can't change that. So school gets out at a certain time, buses come at a certain time. And so I will see, moms come on early while, just to check some things, get some things situated, then they're gone. And then they come back because everybody's off to school and mom's had her coffee now and she can work. At 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, gone. Right? Have to go get the kids, have to get things situated. Maybe there's a soccer game. Maybe there's dance recital. You don't know. That's happening next. And then it's dinner. Somebody's got to cook dinner. And then I'll see them come back online later in the evening and work till 10, 11 o'clock at night. That's when it's quiet time and they can. But all that stress is gone. I can be a mom. I can happily be a mom, not, full of stress and thinking that I'm being measured and watched, and then there's leadership. Now you have to create the culture that allows that individual to feel comfortable enough to operate when they're most productive and they're strongest, and that's the combination that works, because you can have the person who knows when they can be their best.
Yeah.
But if you're not in a culture that allows you to be your best in that time frames and it's constrained, then you're still only going to get partial of that individual to come to the table because you haven't allowed them to work within that time frame, within those constraints in which they are the most productive.
Yeah, no, true. And also, let's for dads too. There's way more dads at the school gate now.
Yeah,
way more.
Yeah.
I drop my kids off every day. And I've always done that, but before and COVID, I would keep talking about COVID, but it was a kind of a little bit of a watershed moment. Before that, there was very few, like really very few. And I would say now, like at least 50%, if not more, dads are dropping off, or they're like kind of, they do the drop off, someone does the pick up, or if they're working at home, they might go pick them up for 20 minutes, half an hour, take them home, get back on. So for everyone, I think it's really cool. I also think, just as a side point, if you're lucky enough to have this conversation, it's a real privilege, isn't it? Because there's many folks that have to go in.
Yeah.
Medical professionals,
Yeah.
policemen, whatever, yeah. But if you're working,
and we appreciate them. We have to appreciate them because they are there waiting for us to get there when we need them, or when they have to be in call, and we very much appreciate that. But when you think about those that are not necessarily needed to be there, and we start to eliminate emission issues, and our environment seems to heal itself like it did during COVID, which was watching the reefs and all kinds of things repopulate and grow back, because we don't have our hands all over things. And there's something to be said for that, right? And why do I want my people frustrated and stressed for being in a car for an hour and a half, and then to give up 3 hours of their lives? So when you create this dynamic and you foster it, and you have to take a sick kid to the doctor, and you're sitting there in the lobby, well, you have one of these things, and guess what? You can check your email, you can respond to Teams, you can still be present. And wow, does that take away so many of those micro stresses and things that build up inside of us that ends up making us sick or stressed out, or, our well-being is so affected by it. So I find, well-being, the idea of championing everybody to be, their whole self and to bring that to work. Don't hide who you are. You know, we have a large LGBTQ workforce within Jaffe. You know, I'm very proud of that. So bring your family mindset to work. Feel comfortable to go where you need to go. And just remember that you have the ability to sit on the beach and work. You have the ability to sit in the emergency room and work. You have the ability to stay connected when and where you need to and or not. And I think that's the thing I really want most people to understand is if we can really combine and create that synergy between work and life, work is going to be better, more productive, more innovative, and more collaboration. But if we're so strict about it, then we're going to resist, we're going to pull back, and that stress comes in. And once that stress comes in, again, you're operating at maybe 50, 60%.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny, work-life balance. Everyone talks about work-life balance, but the opposite of life is death. And they create work. Opposite of work is death. You know, I always find that equation always a bit funny. There's also a really interesting book, and I don't know the author because my mum plays tennis with her, but and she was saying she was writing a new book. It was something like, and I'll message it on when we post out. I'll show. It's like something like poor guy. He thought his work was his life, or something like that. You know, which is I thought really funny. But just on this, we went from all in the office, mostly in London, to my firm. We're 13 and a half years old now. It's evolved a lot, and now we're fully remote, like you. I have people all over the world. Thank you. We've got US, all over the US, Europe, UK, India, Tokyo, the whole thing, fully remote. Just, you know, it's just crazy how it's evolved these last few years. I have to say it was early on. Adjusting the way I led was just a big change because I was used to everyone in. We'd started in the US in 2019, so just before COVID. So we had one person in New York. So I'd experienced it a little bit, but mostly everyone was in the office. And then suddenly, you know, the game changed and we got rid of our office. I cried myself to sleep at how much rent I'd spent over the last, whatever, 10 years before that, you know, and I always thought, you know, maybe it was my ego getting in the way, but we wouldn't be taken seriously without an office. You know, we had an office by the Bank of England. We were a serious exec recruiting firm, you know, and then we happened in America. We had to have a little office in New York. And actually, maybe we did then, maybe we didn't. I don't know. Now you don't, you know, and I think, again, it's about output and it's doing good work for our clients and all, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And we have working mums, and much like you, they can choose when and how they work, and they're dropping the kids off, picking up, and you know, just whatever, they can choose when they work. And it's been really cool. It took me a while to get used to. It was like, oh, this is odd, you know, like I'm working between home and I like to. So when people say remote work, a lot of the time you're thinking you're working from home. Right. But I think also remote work, it doesn't necessarily mean you're working at home. It means you can work from wherever you want. You know,
I work on a cruise ship sometimes. I work, on a vacation, whatever that might be.
No one cares, right? I'm doing a video call. You've got no idea where I am right now. Yeah. Hey, I'm at home in London. Really?
That's right.
Could be, might not. It doesn't really matter. You know, or I do a catch up on video with a client in New York, and, you know, we're talking about search and going through candidates and the whole thing, and they don't care where I am. So that's interesting. And also for me personally, I don't like to stay at home all the time. I actually like to get out, and I like to go somewhere. I like to use my legs and walk and all of that. And in London, you can, you know, like it's a real walking city, bus, train and stuff. So I a few days a week, I go to like a co-working space or a coffee shop, or I work at home. So the remote work for me is that I can choose where I work, which I really like. And yeah, it's been really interesting. It's like, you know, it's almost like, you know, a lot of people are like, oh my God, it's Monday, you know, rather than, oh my God, it's Friday, you know, damn, the weekend. Yes, I can work again on Monday. You want to be, life's short, right? You want to be like, it's like if you have to motivate yourself to start your job on Monday, change jobs. You know, and I'm being a bit facetious, right? I mean, I know economics plays a part in the whole thing, but I know it's easier said than done. But I think it's just, you just do better work. when you're happy, right?
I've had to tell people that, I travel around and I speak a lot about empathy and culture and the importance of those things in DEI and that whole idea of the whole self. And I was done speaking, and this woman came up, to me at the stage, and she started to, talk about COVID. And she was an administrator, and she talked about she did everything, for the law firm to be successful during that time frame. And I said, oh, well, thank you. And she goes, well, that's what I never received. And I said, oh, and I'm so sorry to hear that. She goes, yeah, there's never been a thank you. There's never been acknowledgement of what I did. And so I grabbed the mic and went back and got everybody to hold on a minute. I'd like to share something with you all. And my answer was it's time for you to leave. And I said, I know that's probably the hardest thought for you, but why would you want to continue to work for a culture that doesn't respect the work that you did? Trust me, there's somebody else out there that would very much value what you did. And that sense of value that you would feel is such a great feeling. The pay may be equal, but the fact that I'm worth more than that pay is something that many of us don't get and need. So I'm a big champion of the idea, if the culture isn't working for you, get out and go to the culture that will work. And as scary and as hard as it seems, in the end, you will do so much greater if you can just rip that Band-Aid off and take that opportunity to say, I'm done with this.
100%. Because nowadays, LinkedIn, jobs boards, and everything in between, it's way easier now to look for work. It's also easy to like research companies and try and, do your due diligence. What's the culture like? Message the people that are working in the firm. Ask the person you're about to work for references on them. You often get asked for a reference for the candidate. Ask a reference for the hiring manager. What do you like to work with? I want to know. Give me some references. I want to do a 360 because the work's the work, right? If you're doing PR, without wanting to belittle PR, but PR is PR, whichever firm you might be in, right? But the difference is working with Terry in his culture with his team. And that's going to really make it, that's going to make the difference. And it's worth taking time to, I don't know about you, but Lena, like most people, they take a while to decide to propose and get married. Job interviews is like speed dating.
Yeah.
Right. You meet someone for an hour, if you're lucky, and you choose to spend most of your time with them. So.
Well, and that's it. You are spending a great deal of your time with your coworkers, or whether you're, doing it from a work or virtual remote or in-house, you're still spending a lot of your time in that work dynamic and that work mode. So I think that one of the things that coming out of the pandemic did for all of us was shift the control. So like in the real estate world, you've got the buyer's market and the seller's market, and it's according on where we are economically, and I feel that we have that here. We are now in a talent market, and talent has the power because the talent can now do its due diligence way before the interview process begins. And that's the challenge for corporations, and service industries, to really give an authentic sense of who they are, not one that's just written for the fact that I need to have a women's initiative or a DE&I statement. It's, are you living these things? Can I come to this, environment, and will I experience this? And so that talent market now says I can, really take my time and decide where's the right culture to go. And when you think of it from the legal perspective, most clients stick to their lawyer. They don't hire the law firm. It's a lawyer relationship. So if you're thinking about how do you want to increase revenue, and you're thinking, marketing and all these other things, well, if you just think about the hiring process alone of attracting other lawyers with their book of business to come, and we're seeing a great deal of that type of movement. And a lot of that is coming from big law to start law firms that are changing that idea, that culture and other things in which the big law firm, you just can't write those big ships. They still fall in that old, mentality where the boardroom is profit, not the boardroom is people. So then you got the issue with them from a leadership perspective, where you're being challenged on issues like DE&I, and therefore you're saying, but I'm a small Midwest firm and we don't have accessibility, to different cultures, different races, different genders, whatever that might be. So therefore we're stuck with hiring just all white males. Well, I'm going to call BS on that now, because your ability to cast a much bigger net for attracting talent is really up to you now, because we've ripped the Band-Aid off and technology exists, and we've all proven that this kind of new dynamic works.
Many of the searches we do, they're regional roles, global roles. They don't mind people where people are based. I mean, we're sourcing globally. I mean, there is no more diverse talent pool than that. I mean, even if you just say, hey, anywhere in the US, that's 400 million people, right? That's a diverse mix of people right there.
That sure is.
And you just have way better options, and you can make a better hiring decision. I think that's important. And also, just let me to my point to your point, just on lawyers and books of business, right? Now, if I'm calling your law firm trying to poach your star lawyer to one of my clients, happier people are way harder to move.
Yes,
fact.
That's
right.
Correct.
It's just a fact. And if they're happy means, okay, let's say the money's the same, whatever. Money's never top, but then the money's the same, whatever. It's like, do they like the leadership? Do they like the culture? Is the team good? Like, what's the vibe? Stuff like that. If that's a little bit questionable, I can prize them away. You can start to, they'll have the conversation with me. Maybe they'll even meet the client. Suddenly, you've planted the seed, it's being watered, and they then resign, and 2 weeks later in America, they've started somewhere else. So, and it's just so much cheaper for a company to treat their employees well than having to rehire, recruitment costs, time,
The cost of rehiring alone, retention to me is equal as recruiting, right? So why go get the talent if you can't keep the talent?
Yeah.
And to keep the talent is that sense that we have to constantly adapt to change and stay relevant, which means, big word that came out of, again, the pandemic, empathy. And for those people who cannot show empathy, therefore you're not going to have retention. It's just that simple. Yeah. And the generations alone are demanding empathy now. So you have to come in with the idea of being curious, listening, asking questions, and having that sense of understanding of what makes a person tick in that hour in some cases, right? So, we've got generations where our parents are now getting sick, or our parents are dying, or we're taking care of them. So you just took care of your kids all your life. Now you're taking care of your parents like their kids all your life. And that's got to affect you. So if I know this, and I have this sense of empathy, and I have these abilities for you to work when it's best for you to work, I still get great work product. I still have happy clients. And all of that really comes from this sense of empathy.
Definitely. And by the way, this is throughout the workforce, like you could be a leader or entry level. I think working on your empathy, which is a skill you can improve, it's just going to stand you in good stead. The amount of people, when I say, oh, how come you made that move? Oh, I went with, I used to work with John, and John went to this firm and he took me with him. Or, or my line manager went, they then poached me a year or two later, or people will follow you, like people follow people. They want to work with people.
That's right.
So it's just, for every reason, apart from just being a good human being, it's just so worth it. Like it's just a really good way to behave. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. That I love that. That's probably, sorry, go on.
No. I was just going to say, it is interesting in the sense too, from the idea of that sense of retention, right, and creating that culture and that dynamic, and then that empathy also really allows that idea of production. But really what we're looking at here is, how does one business align with another business? And that's what's quite critical here in my mind. So if you've got large corporations, law firms work for everybody. Everybody needs a lawyer in business at some level. And if that corporation is really stepped up to the idea of empathy and DE&I and creating these cultures and creating tables at the boardroom or chairs at the boardroom table for, discussions of empathy and diversity and inclusion. They're expecting their partnership to be doing exactly the same. So that sense of alignment is critical, not just in the hiring and retention process, but also in the idea of professional development here and aligning with the client. So if the clients are sitting in their boardroom, and most of them are talking about these issues, I mean, I don't know if you have half of the level of insanity that we're seeing here over, Gay Pride and Pride Month, where a corporation stands up for it, and then another group of people, he says, I'm not shopping there anymore, and it's quite hilarious to watch all this, but you have to decide, where is humanity and where do I fit within that? And how does my corporation fit within that? But also, how does it align with my clients? And to me, that's a critical discussion that I like to talk about with our clients is how well are you aligned with your industry and or market focus?
But also just going beyond that, like the empathy, if we just go back to empathy, because lawyer, PR, recruiting, we're all services businesses, right?
Yep.
So our business is people. People are buying from people.
Yep.
And you always get the question, how are you different to your competitors? What makes you different? Why are you better? They can choose, I don't know, they can choose any number of law firms to use. Why are they using you? Or the PR, why do you want to use this PR firm? And I think it goes back to people buy from people. And yes, we're doing business to business, but really it's people. And you brought it up yourself, right? Like they're using a particular lawyer, and that lawyer could be in any number of firms. The client probably doesn't really care, or maybe they only want to use a big law firm. Fine. Which big law firm do they want to use? And so much of it is just how, like, the feeling you get with someone, right? Yeah. And if you've got, to my point to that, if your team are happy and they're engaged and they're enjoying it, it just comes across, doesn't it? It was I watched a talk from Simon Sinek, Simon Sinek, optimist guy.
Gosh, I live by the why.
That's it. And he was like, and there's two great things from him actually, but he was like, I'm going to completely destroy his quote now. But, he said something like, if your employees are happy, everything takes care of itself. That kind of by and large like that. Yep. And that's it. You've got a happy group of lawyers, recruiters, PR people out, and suddenly a client meets them on video or face to face, and they're just happy and just nice to be around. That's the difference that makes a difference.
Who doesn't want to work in that environment? Who doesn't want to feel welcome? Who doesn't want to feel worthy? Who doesn't want to have the idea that somebody's going to come to you, work with you, appreciate what you're doing? We all want that. We all want to feel that. So why aren't leaders recognizing the sense that, when you have these toxic cultures and you think about productivity and you look at revenue, all of that's connected because it's the people who generate that revenue. So happy people generate more hours, generate more revenue. It's a no-brainer. Let me come to work being a happy gay man every day. Don't make me come to work feeling uncomfortable, because you're going to get 50% of me, because either I don't care, I'm uncomfortable, or I'm not allowing my collaboration and my innovation to really shine, because you're already shutting me down by creating a culture where I can't be my whole self. I want to go to work every day and be happy about who I am, and happy about my family, and happy to work with my colleagues. And therefore, my clients are going to get the best that they've ever, gotten and expected.
Yeah, love that. And also more and more now, you're seeing people, they're not waiting. Like you might say, this is what your culture's like, and they'll start, and it's not, they're out. Like I did a poll on LinkedIn recently about that. I mean, just, people are out. They're not interested in, you used to be able to beat them over the head with the paycheck and all of this stuff. Just, it doesn't wash anymore, because you know what others are doing. People are talking about it on podcasts like this, like there's just so much of it around, and there's better places. There's like, what is it? 7 billion people living on this planet. you can find one that's really nice and go work with them, like, or the one bad one you're working with, get rid.
Or go create the culture yourself.
Yeah.
And attract and really survive and thrive. I mean, all of that is optional for us, and I think these are the things that we have to sit back and say, hold on, I don't have to fit within a very specific way in which business is done anymore. It does not exist that way. Yeah. And the idea of people and people power is the idea that humanity isn't a trend, right? And we have to be empathetic to that. So I think there's been some great things. Ted Lasso, to me, is a case study in leadership and empathy. I couldn't have better examples than I can from pulling from a Ted Lasso episode, and I use that quite a bit because I find it to be one of the best case study examples of leadership, allowing for people to fail, allowing for people to be who they are, allowing for changing within a dynamic. Maybe a person says, I've done this for a while, but I'm really interested in trying that. Can you support me in doing something different here? Sure. Yeah. Let's see how it works out. So, I was going to bring up Simon myself, earlier, so I'm glad you did. But I have found the idea of why is what I was looking for, because I'm a very passionate person. So if I can bring my heart to what I do, that's my why. And so I have a purpose every day. I wake up every day and say, I'm going to go help people who help people create great things that help other people every day. I feel great about that. So if I can get the lawyer to think about, wow, you wake up every day to help businesses succeed and thrive, and to people, people's livelihood and all these other things, you should feel so good about who you are and what you do every day, not be dragged down by maybe the idea of the stereotypical mindset of what a lawyer is. Change that stereotypical mindset.
Yeah, no, love that. I also want to put a little disclaimer that don't mistake this kind of hybrid flexible working for not working, because I think and also I think it's important for individuals, because I do speak with a lot of folks, and this is like private conversations where people say, I don't know how I'm still employed, I do no work at home. There's a lot of folks like that, and I just think my message is, whatever you're doing, however you're working, you've got to work hard. No one got anywhere in life without working hard. Like, you've got to put the work in. And then however you do that,
sense of pride.
Sorry, go on.
No, so have that sense of pride.
Yeah, for sure. Like, you've got to apply yourself. Like, sport's such a great example, right? Like, you just see, the sportsmen, men and women that are putting the work in and staying late at training. You get out what you put in life. I'm a big believer in that. And so whether you're working at home or you go in 5 days a week, whatever, apply yourself, go hard, find the way that works for you best, and go for it. And I think also for companies as well. So I know different companies like to work differently. I see my clients as a range, as you do. There's many banks that want people in 5 days. You go work for Twitter and you're in 7 days, 24 hours a day, whatever it is. The cool thing with those examples is that they communicate it. So like, you go and work for Twitter and Elon Musk, and you kind of know exactly what you're in for, and you can choose.
Yep.
Or you go work for you, you know what you're in for, you can choose. You come work for me, you can choose. So I think it's really important, if you're hiring, to be really open with, this is the culture, this is what we expect. What questions have you got? Kind of thing. Like, I think it's really important to do that, because different things for different folks.
Yes. We've had leaders say to us, we're in a recruiting phase, and I had a candidate come in and say, please don't tell me that you have a DE&I culture. Please don't tell me that you have women's initiatives. Please don't tell me that you have an at work or a work-life balance. Don't tell me all the things that we are listing of why our culture works, because all of the other law firms have told me that. And the managing partner said to me, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do, because I was just about to tell them all of that. So he said, so I got up and I said, well, let's go walk around. And they walked around. And I always say, look, you have to take your values off the wall. You have to live your values. You can't just have them plastered on the wall, because we're all, again, going to call BS on you on that. Somehow this is going to come out, a disgruntled employee, an unhappy client, whatever's going to happen, and it's going to create a different dynamic. Took him around, showed him around, saw it, hired him. So I think that's a really important thing for us, right? To understand that just because it's on our website, just because in the hiring process we're going to articulate that, everybody's articulating that now, because we realize those are the important things that we're looking for, to assess what's right for us. I think the idea that we can show it in any way we can, whether that is on our recruiting page, that we're showing that lifestyle of an associate or a new attorney, or, we're inviting people to come experience. You're taking larger teams to meet with clients so they can see different dynamics of people. You're allowing other people to have that opportunity to speak. These are the things that I find are so much more important than those words that we put out in our marketing. Nobody wants to align with a brand. They want to align with a person or people.
Yeah. Love that. Beautiful place to end, Terry. Love it. We could have gone on for another hour.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It
was a great conversation. And again, these things matter to me in my mind, because that's what's going to make the relevant businesses that the newer generations are going to be focused and working on.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm all in on that. I think you're obviously on LinkedIn, so please follow Terry if you don't already. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me. Thanks everyone for watching, and see you all soon.
Thanks again.
See ya.
Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Please do not forget to subscribe in all the usual places: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you like to watch or listen to a podcast. Any comments or feedback, please drop us a DM. If you've got anything that you want us to discuss, again, feel free to get in touch.